Was this a unanimous decision?
Well, of course, as expected, the representative of the government wanted lower rates. Okay, so that's not surprising. But other than that, it's unanimous.
Okay, how much more do you think you'll have to go?
Well, as we keep saying, it's not dependent, but the likelihood of zero in the next two meetings, of course, extremely low.
So I look at it right now at 5.5%, and inflation's at 8%. You know, the other central banks this week, Governor, have told the markets and the press that there might be a need in terms of being restrictive to take actually the policy rate above their own inflation rate. Do you see the need to do that in the Philippines, take your policy rate above where inflation is?
No, because the reason we're way above the inflation target are supply shocks that we expect to wane. And our own forecast is that inflation will be back to 2 to 4% by the third or fourth quarter of next year. So in other words, what we have to do is do more to make sure that that happens. We've done, in that sense, we have done enough, but we have not done enough because we really do not expect, for instance, the Fed to do zero, right? And then, in addition to that, I think inflation expectations, as shown by our survey of private forecasters, is higher than our own forecasts. So we have to do maybe we have to do some more to convince them that they should revise the forecast downwards.
Right.
By the way, historically, they do that. They do eventually revise their forecast when they see that our forecasts are quite realistic.
And hopefully they do that sooner.
Yes.
Right. Now,
and that's why...
I was about to ask you then,
yes.
what do you think is your neutral... Is there a neutral rate that you're looking at right now, beyond which, of course, things become restrictive, and hopefully people that put these surveys in start listening, because it doesn't seem, Governor, the inflation data is listening.
Well, the reason, of course, is the month-on-month inflation so far is not consistent with... If you multiply it by 12, then it's not consistent with 2 to 4. So I think what will convince them is the moment they see that the month-on-month inflation have returned to 0.3, 0.4% per month. And our forecast is that will happen because, well, initially we said year-on-year will peak in October. Then it turned out November was higher than October. And now we expect December to be higher than November. So we have actually revised our forecast of when the inflation will peak. But that's largely because of weather. Okay? Shortages of fruits and vegetables. So on the other hand, the weak peso is no longer the problem. And we are also seeing fuel prices go down. So that's why we're confident that relative to our forecast of what inflation will be 3 to 4 quarters from now, our policy rates, our real policy rates are already clearly positive. But then maybe we have to do more to convince markets that how serious we are about bringing down, making sure that inflation will be back to normal by the second half of this year. And that's very, very important. That's very, very important to us.
Right. And you mentioned, Governor, you mentioned the currency, which you're correct. I mean, it's strengthened recently, so it hasn't been as much of a complication compared to recent months. What I want to ask you then is,
perfect word, David,
you're no longer active? You're no longer active in the currency market?
We're still there, but we sometimes buying, sometimes we're selling. Unlike the past, where largely we were selling. Okay, so now
Okay. Now,
in other words, now it can go both ways, which is what we like.
okay, now let's look at next year. These things can change month to month, as you point out. It doesn't seem like inflation from October to November to December, maybe January. That's short term. It's very hard to gauge because things are fluid. If inflation, if you're correct, and inflation falls back to range around this time next year, would you be prepared to cut rates as soon as you possibly can?
Well, it depends on how the global economy is going, because one scenario is that global financial markets will remain very tight. Because, for instance, I think that is the forecast of Larry Summers, for instance. So if you take that scenario, then maybe it will be premature to say that we'll be cutting, say, in the third or fourth quarter of next year. So these are highly uncertain times globally, and that's why it's very hard to say what we will do. Just 6 months away, it's not that easy to say what we will do.